How's it going, gents?
Hello.
How's it going, guys? All right?
Hi, good, yeah. Can you see me?
Yeah, we're just doing audio, mate.
Just in audio, fair enough.
Yeah, you didn't have to worry about tidying up.
I just had a shave, done my hair, put perms.
Are you with us, Colin?
Top 10 OOD tunes was one of your questions, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. You can send us that in a message. We're gonna sort of put a Spotify list together.
Okay, I haven't thought of that yet. Really, it's always the latest ones for me. Obviously, some classics from the past that I like. So whenever I'm writing a tune, it's always the latest one. I think, oh, this is it.
This is the one.
This is exactly the best I've ever done. And then you know the next one, and it's like, oh no, it's this, and it's not how it works for real. Just how my head works.
Hey, welcome to Strange Radio, guys. Thank you for joining us. And for those of you that aren't aware, do you want to introduce yourselves, explain a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Okay, I'm Steve Callaghan, been part of OOD since the beginning with Cole. DJ is Steve OOD, live in Oxford now.
My name is Colin. I've been a member of OOD since '94 alongside Stevie. I've also had a few other projects in Psy-Trance and techno and stuff like that. And as well as making music, I work as a mastering engineer and a mix engineer, so I make other people's music sound good too.
Make other people's music sound good. I like that. It's funny you mention your other projects, because I think I first heard you guys as Unconscious Collective. I think when was that? About 96, 97, something like that, was it?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Did that come before or after OOD?
That was after OOD. And we had one EP out on Flying Rhino Records under the name Unconscious Collective. And for a while in the early 2000s, we kind of played out live under that name as well when we had kind of friends joining us. Because that was always the original idea of the Unconscious Collective, was as a project where we could collaborate with other people. But a lot of those other people who we would collaborate with on stage ended up becoming a firm part of the band at that time. So kind of the name Unconscious Collective became less used, and we just put everything under OOD. It seemed easier.
Just put it under OOD. It was easier. Yeah, fair enough. So for those of you that aren't, or for those people listening that aren't sort of aware of what you guys are up to, because how would you describe your sound under the OOD project?
Under the OOD project, yeah. At the moment, we're trying to get this sort of area which is a little bit less hectic, a little bit deeper, but still psychedelic and very, very trance-inducing. So it's not too stop-start and build to nothing, whatever. We want that rolling trance feeling.
That's almost like most progressive these days, isn't it? Build to nothing.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean to be, because it's all good stuff, but
yeah, everything we put in our tunes, we like to think it has a reason to be there. It's like if it's a build, track's building, then we're building to get to a particular place. You know, if there's a break, then there's a break because we're introducing something, or something in the music is changing. You know, for me, it's important that there's a lot of kind of emotion and vibe in the music, rather than just pure anonymous dance floor fodder.
I like that. Anonymous dance floor fodder. So what you're saying is you're writing with a purpose, aren't you? Really, it's everything that's in the music is purposeful rather than just filler.
Yeah.
We're really trying to get to a place where there's a stage where at the end of the set you are really seriously tranced out. You're in a different head state, so that it's more meditative or whatever you want to call it, but you're not really in yourself anymore. You're just open to the music. And for me, that takes like that real continuous sort of trance element to get that going. Even though some of the stop-start stuff is really clever and great to hear, and it's good energy, and with all the builds and stuff, I can't ever get into that sort of deeper, really blissed out state where you're just like when it's been rolling, if you know what I mean. So you wanted to get that sort of vibe, maybe a little bit more deeper than not too hectic.
Yeah,
that's the basic aim of this, of what we've been doing recently, and
I like the ethos. Do you think that that's been the same ethos since the very beginning, or have you found that sort of evolved as you
the
guys
psychedelic side? No, because we've experimented with all sorts of stuff. So some stuff wasn't really just about building the trance, but actually mostly you're probably right. It mostly has been with that sort of ethos. To be fair, but no,
we've done, yeah.
Yeah, that's a fair comment. But we have tried all sorts. You know, some stuff that's a little bit more, you know, jump up and not so trance-inducing, maybe.
Nice. So, outside of the sort of actual ethos of why you write music, what inspires your creative process as a group?
I'm mainly inspired by getting in a room with other people who I respect and trust, getting stoned, listening to music, and then just the desire to make music comes just in that situation for me. That's what I find most inspiring, is getting in a room with other people and making music together.
Nice.
Yeah, I find it's the same as Cole, really. It's I find it much more enjoyable when I'm writing with other people. For some reason, it's a little bit more of a task on your own, but I still enjoy it sometimes, especially when you've got the vibe going. But my main thing is I'm trying, because I DJ a lot, I'm looking for loads of tunes all the time, and sometimes I'm after a certain thing, and it's like it's not quite there, and I see lots of stuff that's very near and around it, and you just got to write. You just want to try and write that thing that you're after. So that sometimes inspires me. But yeah, Cole's right. It's much more enjoyable with other people, I find.
Really interesting, because when I've produced, for the most part, it's like a bit of an introspective thing. For me, I like learning to produce as I was going along, and sort of the whole thought process it took me to as I was exploring different sounds and all that sort of stuff. That for me was sort of the joy of it. It was like, what's going to pop out of my head next? I've no idea, you know, or, you know, and then you'd obviously be a little bit inspired by stuff you'd heard or whatever. And then occasionally be inspired by like a new piece of equipment, and you'd be like, oh, I can make a whole new palette of noises utilizing this. And do you guys get inspired by stuff outside of the band members as well? Do you find, like, Cole, I know you've sort of got a bit of hardware and whatnot, do you find that inspires you when you get a new bit of shiny kit?
New shiny kit is always amazingly inspiring. You know, you play with it and you hear stuff that you haven't heard before, and you know you want to put it in a piece of music. But mainly, I think the solo inspiration and when I'm actually in the process of making music with Steve or Tim or whoever else, it's about hearing something in the head and trying to get that out of the head into a form, into other people's heads. So, you know, music that I hear inspires stuff inside me, the desire to try and to make that a part of whatever it is I'm hearing. So obviously it helps when you're actually making your own music rather than just listening to someone else's, to get that idea out of the head and into the music. And that's a fantastic challenge. And I think for me, at least, that's one of the main challenges of making music, is actually realizing the ideas that you have.
Nice. Because you DJ a fair amount, Steve, does DJing impact how you produce? So, for example, I know that a lot of my own stuff wasn't really designed to be as part of a DJ set. It was just a standalone 10 minutes of music to listen to. So I didn't have to worry about like intros or outros or making it mixable or DJ friendly.
Yeah.
You could change time signatures or whatever. Are you coming from that position of, at some point, I'm going to have to play this in front of a crowd?
I'm coming more from that point these days than I used to. Like before, whenever I just write a track on my own, it would just be because I wanted to write the track. And if it ended up being sort of like a Psy-Trancey one, I might put it out as OOOD on one of our albums or whatever. And then I did I realised I had quite a stack of sort of half-finished ones. And so I did a solo project not too long ago, a year or so ago, called Bennun, which did quite well. I've got an album out, and I've got a few more of those tracks coming out soon. And those ones, that reminded me of what you were saying about it's like being quite introspective, and I did really enjoy that, actually. So that was really nice to get that out. I used to just purely write for the sake of, I just want to write this tune, and it'd often be like a chill out tune. or whatever it was that was going through, with no idea about labels, DJing or anything. I've come to realise that actually making it DJ friendly really helps me, and will probably help the record. And so I do think about those things a lot more these days. And like especially the latest stuff, it's been really quite a concept about where exactly I want things to be, where there's this sort of an area where I don't think there's enough going on. And so I've been really thinking of it in terms of, a lot to do with DJing, so intros and outros to take into account and things. So it should hopefully be a bit easier to DJ OOD tracks, because I've often found them quite difficult, because of our intros and outros sometimes like stop and you go, bit more concentrating on that a little bit more these days than I used to.
That makes sense. So hearing about how you guys are sort of inspired individually, and obviously Colin, you mentioned part of that inspiration process for you is getting in a room with your bandmates and putting it all together. A little bit about the mechanics of how that works. Do you guys write sort of from a distance and Dropbox each other files? I'm assuming there might be a bit of that. How often, because you're all different parts of the country, how often do you get together and actually do what you do?
Well, for the last couple of years, at least, Steve has been driving from Oxford to Bristol at least once a week, on average, to come and spend 24 hours locked in the studio here.
Wow.
Some of it with me, but a lot of it I'll go to bed and just leave him to it. And this is a point that I actually wanted to make when Steve was talking before about the DJ aspect to it. Steve is responsible. Steve is the DJ of out of the two of us. Steve is the DJ. That's unquestionable. And the experience that he's gained as a DJ, writing music for the last 25 years, means that basically I've just been, the entire arrangement almost is largely down to Steve, and that's largely down to his DJ experience.
It's kick and the bass are largely down to you, aren't they?
Yeah, I would agree, absolutely, and a lot of the percussion. But this is where the DJ experience can really shine through and really make a big difference to the track.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cole.
That's very polite of you, especially leaving someone in your studio writing music while you go to bed. I think that's probably my worst nightmare that you've just described there. Having to go to bed and go to sleep in the next room while someone's dropping doof next door.
Well, we've got it honed to a fine art now. Steve will use headphones or just turn it down a little bit. It's never been a problem.
You've had 26 years of putting up with each other, so. So let's sort of take that concept and that question and idea and track back that 26 years. How were you writing music initially? What was that creative process then? Were you ever at any point living together? Were you, I assume your lifestyles were a little bit different. Was it party to party, week by week, or has it always been this sort of a similar arrangement?
It was the early 90s. It was utterly nutty. Just trying to think, we must have lived at the same house a couple of times. We did.
We have done in the 2000s, and I think briefly in the
135.
You never lived at 135, did you?
Well, I sort of did.
Sort of, yeah, but you never actually had a room of your own.
You had a sleepover every week.
There were 7 of us living there, and this is where the first OOD studio was, in my bedroom. And basically, it was all the time, every day, every week. Whenever the studio was up and running, it would take us 2 hours to take the studio down out of my bedroom and put it in the van to take it to a gig. And after the gig, it would take like a week to get the studio out of the van into the room set up so that we could use it. But whenever it was set up, it was in use. It would be all night sessions, all day sessions. I look back on those times, and it's one of the most amazingly creative experiences I can imagine. Because the stuff that came out of that time that we made together. I mean, yeah, the production was, you listen back to it now and it was like, oh, did that kick really have to sound like that?
Yeah, especially, the kick end.
Yeah, but the actual writing, 25 years later, it's still some of my proudest writing moments, especially stuff like the Plurastan EP with Steve and Nige and Tim. It was like, that was just downloaded from on high in a week. Don't know where that came from.
Yeah. I suppose that over that period, I mean, how has the equipment changed that you've been using? You say it took you a week to pack down or get the studio out the van after a gig back into your studio format. Is it a lot? Was that because there was a lot of hardware involved? Is it these days? Is there a mix? Yeah. You know, because I mean, obviously, I've known you guys for quite a while now. I think 2003 was when I first booked you to play at Strange Days. I remember you walking down Oxford Street in the middle of Manchester with a keyboard under one arm, and you know, it was like bags and flight cases and rucksacks and just like tons of gear. I mean, is there something to be said for, you know, do you ever just go to a gig with a laptop and a controller? Or is it always do you find that equipment integral to your sound and your process?
We've done the whole laptop live thing once. Worst experience I've ever had. We'll never do it again if I can avoid it.
Why?
Well, we're musicians. We're musicians. Okay, so we write music on computers, but we play instruments.
Yeah.
And as a musician, the idea of performing on stage without any musical interaction with the music that we're supposedly performing, it's just wrong. It feels wrong to me.
Yeah. So one thing you mentioned, just skipping back slightly, you said something which I just want to sort of comment on for a second. You said when the studio was up and plugged in and set up, it was in use. Now, I think for perhaps younger listeners that, you know, are fairly new to the music scene, maybe they've just sort of in university, just started partying and whatnot. I think that's probably an important observation to make, is that was a lifestyle for you, wasn't it? It wasn't like we set aside 2 hours on a Saturday to do a bit of production. It was day in, day out. That was what you were doing, and you threw yourself into it wholeheartedly, didn't you?
There's a lot of partying as well. Crawling back from a party and then making some more music until we passed out, sort of thing. So, yeah, it was a bit of a lifestyle thing back then, yeah. And this was post sort of university or college, depending on who. So we had a bit more free time. We weren't studying, so we just had to try and make a bit of a living.
Else. And I'm pretty sure, Stevie, you've had a couple of earlier life choices, but music has always been a huge driving factor for you as well. So it's almost like, why would you want to spend time doing anything else when you've got this that you could be doing?
Yeah, for sure. When you sort of moved to Bristol, and where did you say, Steve?
Oxford.
So you've moved your separate ways and whatnot. With getting to gigs, tell us a little bit about what would sort of go into preparing for a gig. I mean, you guys are fairly synonymous with, like, say, Tribe of Frog, for example. What would go into getting ready for a big event like that?
We'd try and work out a set list that we'd all agree on, and we'd probably work a bit on our individual, what we're going to do. Like, we generally try and do some at least live jamming of something or other over backing tracks at the very least. So a bit of working out what we're going to do, and I don't think we do much more preparation than that these days. Like years ago, we tried all sorts of things, like hiring places to jam, especially when we were doing our more slower stuff, the unconscious collective sort of chill out stuff. We were doing a lot of that. Was, you know, like Rio would be playing a full drum set and Colin would be playing, you know, proper keyboards all the way out, all the way through and stuff like that. And so that was a bit more live band based, and we'd have to practice a lot more for that. But we're really, these days, you don't have to do too much because you know what you're doing, really.
Yeah, we've been doing it for 20 years by now, you know, in the format that we're doing it these days. And it's a lot of the live stuff that happens on stage is improvisation anyway, so you can't practice that and without kind of dulling the magic of the moment.
You kind of bit like, you know, you get some presets together that really work and maybe work out a couple of things that work, but then when it comes to actually playing live, a lot of that often goes out the window. But you know, and you're improvising more and more, but at least you've got sounds that you know are going to work with particular tunes.
I like that, and that's going to leave space for a bit more sort of creative interpretation, isn't it? And you know, do you find yourselves doing that quite a lot during a gig? Maybe it's a bit busier than you expected, do you ramp it up a little bit? Or if it's a little bit quieter, do you find yourself sort of playing to the audience and the mood of them?
Yeah.
You know, do you find that you adjust how you play depending on what the...
Yeah, I mean, generally we try and find out when we're playing, so who we're playing after and before, so we get the sort of general vibe. So most of the time we wouldn't have to update our set, but we have done before. Just thought, actually, no, let's go a bit more this way because, look, it's a lot more chilled than we thought, you know. Let's not play our most full-on stuff. Let's play some more of the deeper, funky stuff, you know.
We generally plan out the arrangement of the set beforehand and make an arrangement in Ableton Live, but because we've got all our back catalogue inside that Ableton arrangement, as well as the kind of the set that we've worked out, we've always got the ability to go off in a different direction if it becomes necessary at any point.
Yeah.
I like that. Steve, you just hit on something super cool there. It's something that when I was learning to DJ as a teen, the chap who was sort of teaching and mentoring me a little bit, he said exactly the same thing. And he was like, Chris, you can quite easily make your set a whole lot better just by speaking to the people before and after you on the bill. And, you know, that straight away is, I mean, as a promoter, when people contact me and say, you know, who's before and after me, I want to have a chat with them.
Yeah.
Straight away, that makes me like, you know, 2 thumbs up. I'm like, instantly trust them a little bit more. You can assume the flow of the night's going to be a little bit cleaner and, you know.
Yes.
Speaking of flow, do you tend to take that into consideration? I mean, not just for the tempo of your event, but perhaps what the promoter might expect of you as well? Or do you go on the basis that they've booked us because they know what we do and we're just going to do that?
It's a bit of both, but you've got to remember why you're there. You're there for the dance floor. You're not there for yourself. And it's the night as a whole that's the important thing, and the promoters booked you because they think that you can fit in with their vision of what they want the night to be like and make it better. So I think it's vital for us to try and see how we can increase the quality of the night as a whole, not just kind of play all our bangers one after the other, because it's not about that.
Yeah, for sure. The promoters that you've worked with, I mean, let's use Jason at Tribe of Frog. You guys have a historic relationship with him. You know, I didn't even begin to try and count how many times you've played. It's probably dozens and dozens. But Steve shaking your head there. It's like, yeah, a lot.
It's always good.
Always good. I'm assuming you get a little bit more carte blanche with someone who trusts you enough to book you dozens of times. I'm assuming they just, you know, want you to do your thing a little bit. And, you know, does playing gigs like that give you a different sense of sort of satisfaction to some events where you might be working a little bit more to a brief or?
Oof. Yeah, there is slightly different side. Well, I mean, I was just, you know, you start thinking of, there are all sorts of different gigs. I mean, there's a certain thing getting booked by somewhere that you really know, because you know exactly what's going to really work. So you don't really, there's no real worries about trying to make things flow or what's the best thing, what are most people going to want, you know. All of that is sort of like, you know. So that's out of the question. But I couldn't say that it was, yeah, it's a difficult question because each gig to their own, you know. It could be, who knows what's going to make a gig great or not. Yeah.
And I think there is a good degree of trust both ways between us and Tribe of Frog because of the length of that relationship. You know, I mean, they ask us if we want to play. We just say yes, and that's the end of the conversation.
That's nice. It's nice to have that relationship with you know, with the promoter, and you can, as an artist, you can relax a little bit to know that, you know, you're going to be put in front of a certain amount of people. There's going to be, you know, they're not going to spell your name wrong on the flyer or anything like that. You've built up that sort of rapport, haven't you? You know, over a period of time.
It's helped us so much. You know, Jason has helped us so much through the years. He's, you know, been, like you say, booked so many times. It's been a real pleasure and privilege.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Let's quickly talk about some of the other notable gigs that you've played at. I mean, just having a quick jump on your Facebook page, you got videos of Universo Paralello on there. How was that as an event to play at?
Absolutely mental. It's the dance, the Universo dance floor in 2010 was immense. It was not too far off, I guess, what we got at Boom that same year when we played in the dance temple there. And it's one of the hottest places I've ever been. That beach at that point was very, very, very hot.
Especially for you.
Especially, well, and many others who also kind of...
And Billy Cosmosis, yeah.
Yeah.
And Rama a bit as well.
Yeah.
They were all had to be put on drips. It was so hot, they was dehydrated.
Yeah.
It's a big old mess.
They're very accommodating, very friendly, and very, very professional. And
Yeah.
Within the limitations of what was physically and technically possible in that location, they did everything they could. Really recommend it as an experience.
That's fantastic, and that's Brazil, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, just moving on now, what other gigs would you find have been sort of fairly notable? I know it's going to be difficult to select, like, I'd say, your best gig ever, because I'm sure you're all going to have different opinions on that, and to be fair, you wouldn't want to highlight one at the risk of omitting another, but...
Just an obscure one here that just suddenly popped into head, and it was only a tiny little party, and it was quite far down south, like near the islands, but on the mainland of Japan, up in these mountains. And it was just a few of us and some Japanese hippies. Like how many? Well, about 50 of us or something. And we had a little party, and it was just the most good, like 360 degrees of like this unbelievable landscape. We were on top of a mountain, sea, surrounded by sea, but other mountains and other islands. Remember that dawn was so unbelievably gorgeous. It was stumbling around with after a few shiitake, or so, shall we say? It was fantastic. Absolutely, just so beautiful and such wonderful vibe and lovely people. That one just popped into my head.
Japan, I've never been, but always wanted to.
There's two gigs for me that stand out, kind of look at opposite ends of our career so far. I think the one that's personally, well, they're both. Okay, so when we first met and started making music together, we were going. There was a party in London called Pagan, which was happening every 2 months in a place called Tyson Street Studios. Steve knows exactly what I'm going to say.
The infamous Tyson Street.
Yeah, and basically this party, along with Return to the Source, was one of the first events to put on the Goa trance sound in the UK. I mean, Stevie and Rama organised another of the first ones in Oxford, but that's a different story. And we'd all go to these things every 2 months religiously. They had the same 4 DJs every time, no variation, just a variation in the order of who was playing. And Stevie had got to know a couple of the DJs fairly well from his time in London. And I think this was before even we had our first release, before Silence came out, I think it was. Is that right, Stevie?
Hang on, are you thinking of the New Year's Eve OOD gig?
Yeah.
Oh, that was an extraordinary night, yeah. No, I think we must have had a release by then, no? It was right at the beginning.
Yeah, I think this was just after our first release, and basically to be invited to be one of the only live acts at a seminal Goa trance event like that we'd all been going to for as long as we'd known its existence. That was a career defining moment for me. That was like, wow, we can actually do this, and it's fantastic, and oh my God, these people are asking us to perform our music for them. That was incredible for me anyway. The other end is Azora 2017 on that main stage after Eat Static and System 7. That had been a long time coming, and a absolutely.
That was nice, yeah. But can I chat that original gig that you were saying, Cole? That was extraordinary for me as well. I remember being on the dance floor, and they used to have punch every time you'd walk in, free punch. And because it was New Year's Eve, I asked for 2 goes on the punch. And it was only after I had 2 goes that they told me that because it was New Year's Eve, they'd made it double strong.
You had a quadruple punch, mate.
Yeah, so I was on the dance floor, no idea that I was a human being whatsoever, just utterly lost in the music, completely blissed out, no idea who or what I was. And there's a tap on my shoulder, it's like, you've got to play now. And I was taken because I literally didn't know who I was, and got taken to with these keyboards like a 303 and the Yamaha, and it wasn't even on a stage. Because we were sort of sectioned off, so I was literally just led on the dance floor to a different area, and it's like, now you've got to do the music. And I was like, oh my God. And then I remember getting hold of this 303 and moving it, and it felt so powerful. I felt it go whoop, and I was like, oh my God. And it was building, and I just remember that being the most intense experience. It was like, my God, I am controlling the music. This real responsibility suddenly came into my head, and it's like the most wild, absolute fantastic night. It was really crazy, and luckily we recorded it, so a lot of that was on our first album. So
I like the way you phrased that. Someone told you that you have to do music. It's like, come and do music.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'd forgotten all about that. Yeah, it was somewhere else.
That's bonkers. I think, doing events like that and playing gigs like that can't help but be an influence to sort of later stuff. I'm sure that story will have been recounted in your head 100 times, and it's something that's sort of fairly seminal. You used that word, didn't you, Col? It's playing an event like that. It changes you as an artist, doesn't it?
Formative.
Yeah, exactly. Now, before you were involved in the Psy scene, or Goa scene as was, and you did some chill out stuff as Unconscious Collective and whatnot, what influenced you guys as growing up? I mean, what did you listen to as teens or pre-university, or what were your parents chucking on?
I've been obsessed with music since I was little, according to my parents, and used to go nutty in my pram to music on the radio. So I've literally grown up loving it all. I do remember my brother having a go at me once, because I've got an older brother, and when I was probably about 7 or something, I heard, who was it? Oh, it was Judas Priest, Breaking the Law. And I was putting it on again and again, just going, wow, it's amazing, jumping around. My brother's like, right, you're a metaler. And I was like, okay, right, well, whatever. And the very next day I was listening to Rose Royce, Wishing on a Star.
Oh, great.
And loving it. Yeah, my brother came in and said, no, you're not allowed to like this if you like that. And I was like, what? And I've always had that attitude since. It's like, everyone's got these tastes. And I'm like, what? It's like, it's music, man. It's beautiful. So I've loved it all, really. So from, disco to, Hendrix, massive influence on me early on. And the list doesn't really stop from classical to everything.
Down. What about you, Cole?
My parents were big into their classical music, so I grew up listening, or having played to me whole, stuff like Beethoven, Mozart, and the classical greats. But from an early age, I also remember albums that my parents had. Like my mum had a Joan Armour Trading album, the one with Walk Under Love
and Affection.
I think it was before. No, yes, that was that same album, and that was a huge influence on me, as well as things like the Goodies album, but especially as Everything You Ever Wanted to Hear on the Move But Were Afraid to Ask, which is a kind of a early 1970s rendition of various classical pieces like Carmen, various other things, but on an original Moog synthesizer. And I remember listening to that album over and over again in my dad's headphones at the age of, must have been 7 or 8 when it came out. And I'd already been playing piano for a couple of years by then. My parents gave me lessons when I was very young. And that and the piano kind of just set the scene for everything else that came after it, I think. Funk and soul. I was in funk and soul bands and kind of like classic 80s pop. It's a huge 80s cheesy synth pop runs through me like a stick of rock.
Go on. Well, while we're talking cheesy 80s synth pop, name a guilty pleasure of the pair of you. Go on.
Living in the Box. Living in the Box.
Tune.
Is this from 80s synth pop?
Oh, at any point, it could have been last week. Just a guilty
got too
pleasure.
many guilty pleasures music-wise.
I'm not guilty about it.
Okay, here's a really cheesy one. Christopher Cross. What's that? Arthur's theme song. Christopher Cross.
All right.
Or I Love Sailing by Christopher Cross.
I wouldn't have expected that. You've surprised me there a little bit. But,
when I say I have eclectic taste in music, I literally, It is. I've never met anyone that actually really does.
It's true, because most people who aren't either in the music industry or, you know, people who maybe go to the odd gig, but music isn't an integral part of their life. When you say, "Oh, I listen to a bit of everything," they just mean different subsects of popular music, don't they? Generally, you know, you know, you do find that people who work within the music industry or artists or producers, you know, naturally just have a wider range of influences. When people ask me, I always say ABBA to Zappa. You see the look on people's faces. So we've talked a little bit about your inspirations within the Psy scene, or early inspirations, sort of events-wise and whatnot. And we've talked a little bit about outside of the Psy scene, what your sort of formative music years were like. At what point, joining the two together, at what point did you meet? Like, where did you guys actually form?
Do you want to tell the actual story of the meeting?
Yeah, we want the real story, like not the one you've rehearsed.
No, there's no rehearsal. Just been told a few times. That's all over the years.
Yeah, we were both living in Oxford. Well, actually, I should say all three of us were living in Oxford, because we'd obviously started out with 3 people. But I met Steve. I had my housemate got involved in some shady, dodgy business and then went on holiday, and the business that he was involved in kind of collapsed, and the person that he was involved in with this business came round to my house when my housemate was on holiday, looking for my housemate with a baseball bat.
Wow.
And, you know, this guy kind of threatened me in various different ways and threatened my equipment, my little studio that I had at the time. And I was in the house on my own, and I didn't want to be on my own in the house right then anymore after I managed to get him to leave. So I went round to my friend Scott's house, which is just around the corner, banged on his door. This guy just been kind of threatening me with a baseball bat because of my housemate. And this guy that I didn't know, who was staying at Scott's at the time, opened the door to me and said, "Oh, I'll go and find him for you." And that was Steve. So we got talking that afternoon, and we discovered a lot of similarities in music tastes and the desire to make music and what we were both into at the time. And I was working on a tune. I was halfway through this little happy dance thing called Dance Motherfucker. And I invited Stevie along to try and help me finish it. And he did. And it was great. Well, at least it was better than it had been when I was working on it on my own.
Nice.
So that was how Steve and I met.
And the rest is history.
Well, the rest was how Nigel and I and Steve met.
After there was you two and Nigel. At which point did the other members come in?
A few years after Nigel left, really, we moved down to Bristol, and we asked Ramsey and Rio to join us, basically, about a year or so after Nigel left, to help out. They were two of our favourite DJs as well as good friends. Well, they were gagging to write some music and put their input in, and they really helped.
Steve's known Ramsey for a year or two longer than I have, and both Ramsey and Rio were close friends of me, Steve and Nige, right from the very beginning of OOOD. You know, they came to every gig. They used to hang out in the house. They used to sit in the studio whilst we were writing. You know, I remember seeing Rio learn to DJ in my house on my housemate Andy's deck in like '95. So it was the most natural thing in the world for them to actually become a part of what we were doing at the time.
Yeah, it's a question that I'd not really planned to ask, but as you just used that word, sort of natural, was it always just something that you fell into in terms of how it all progressed? Was it all quite organically, or at some point did you guys sit down and say, right, we want to start banging out some albums and we want to start getting international bookings? And for the people that might be listening to this that are new or maybe aspiring, how did that process work for you?
One of the little sayings that we had right from the very beginning that I remember, like from 95 days, is you can't make it happen. You've got to let it happen. And the foundation of everything for us, and I would hope for many other artists as well, is purely making the best music that you can. Without that, there is no problem. And that's really kind of all we've ever focused on, and everything else has just come as a result of that one desire, just to make the best music we can. At least that's how I see it. Maybe Stevie sees it in a slightly different way.
Well, I must admit, it's very organic from my end, really, is how it's been. There's been no plan other than what Colt's just said. We just get in the studio and get excited about writing music, you know. So it sort of leads its own way. Just follow where the music takes you and try and do to your best. In terms of organisation, one of the big things to overcome is to finish tracks.
Yeah.
Actually get them finished, because it's so good to get loads of ideas down and then you just want to get on to the next. It's like, no. So the discipline comes in going, right, let's finish this track. It's sounding good, but it's not finished. So that probably made the difference with us suddenly getting releases and stuff. And
yeah, because until you finish tracks, you can't get them released.
Yeah.
And it's learning our skills in an analog studio where you could literally only write one track at a time. You try to start a second track up before the first track's finished, then the first track will never get finished because everything's analog. There's no patch memories or anything.
Yeah.
So it was strictly write a track, finish the track, then start the next one. And that's a fantastic discipline to learn. I think like Stevie says, that, without that, you haven't really got an act. You've got a bunch of 2-minute ideas.
I was looking at what you guys had booked over this year. You did have a few things in the calendar, which I'm assuming all plans have come to a halt given what's happening globally with the Rona. Left you more time for producing? Can your fans expect at some point in the next couple of months you're going to go, well, here's what we've been doing with our 6 months where we've not been gigging, boom, there's a load of tunes? Or have you been taking it as an opportunity to just rest? Have you been taking it as an opportunity to do more mastering, Colin? Or how's that worked?
We've worked.
Yeah.
Worked.
You basically said it. Next few months, there's going to be quite a few revelations, hopefully.
When was your last album?
We'll see. That's still to come, and we're not going to say anything more about that right now. But
that was that's a few revelations in the next few months. That's all. Yeah.
When was your last album? Was it? Save me bringing up Discogs. Was it 4/4?
The last album, OOOD album, was...
No, You Think You Are, I think, was the last. Yeah, You Think You Are was the last one. I think that was 2011.
December
2012. Was it?
Yeah.
Okay. So ages ago, yeah. So we need to do that at some point.
At some point, we need to write another album.
At some point, that raised eyebrow call didn't give it away at all. But you've had a string of EPs, haven't you? You've had Swing and a few other stuff since then.
Widely spaced out, but yeah.
Yeah. How do you find the mindset that you're in differs from an EP to an album? I mean, when you're writing an album, is it essentially, hang on, we've just written 8-10 tracks and we can put them in an album? Or are you going for like a cohesive sound or thought or message?
From my perspective, it's been like we suddenly realised we've got a whole bunch of tunes that are unreleased, and it's like, okay, well, we could make an album out of this. What do we need? What else do we need to make? And this direction quite often comes from Steve or Ram or the DJs in the band. What other tunes do we need to make this collection of tracks into a cohesive album? What sort of BPM and mood would it need to be able to finish off the album, to give us a track order that really makes sense as a unit?
That makes sense.
That's my experience of how the album writing process goes.
Steve, when you're writing, do you have that sort of, are you focusing on one track at a time and what's in front of you, or are you thinking, well, this track needs to be of a certain ilk because it's going to go at the end of an album, and you sort of joining the dots together as you go along?
It really depends on like what you're saying. If it's for an album, it's really different. For if it's, I'm doing lots of other projects at the moment, and some releases coming out with them, and there's absolutely no thought other than just making the music as good as possible and going with where it wants to go. But with albums, it's very much what Cole just said. Like you want the album to work as a whole, and we've got that wrong a couple of times, a little bit, and other times we've got it better. But I think we're getting better at it. Yeah. So when you've got a load of tunes, like we might have, say, 15 tunes or something, maybe only 8 of those will make it into the album, or you'll have an album's worth, but actually you need to write a couple more, like Cole was saying, and take those ones out because they don't really fit in there. And in the past, we bunged them in an album as well, because they're like, but we think about it a little bit more these days. And
yeah, you mentioned sort of the way that you write music being quite organic and everything, you know, in the way that you sort of, you didn't necessarily plan OOOD and whatnot, it all just naturally came together. How do you guys promote yourself or approach promoting yourself? Is that very much the same ethos as in, we're just going to put music in front of people on Facebook or whatever, and if people like it, you know, fair dues?
yeah.
Or is that something you give a little bit more thought to? And what's your approach for getting music in front of people?
I think Cole's a bit better at answering, because we're both useless at this. We don't promote anything beyond, like you said, we just like wrote some tunes and put them up. But one of the good things about getting other labels involved is they can actually do a bit more professional promotion.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll need some management at some point, but
you've managed all right so far, haven't you?
Yeah, well, but it's been sometimes it's been 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. I have a problem with advertising and promotion. I hate the whole idea of it, but I know it's necessary if one wants to make a living as an artist or a musician. Then a certain amount of that is necessary. So, you know, I've learned to grit my teeth and do what needs to be done a lot of the time, although not all the time. But it's two different, for me, it's 2 different mindsets. You've got the making music, and then you've got talking about music, and they're completely different things for me. And I would rather, especially now and in the last few years, I would rather just sack all that side off it and just make music. I just want to make the music. I don't want to have to try and get people's attention with it. That's not why I do it anymore. Certainly not anymore. You know, I know my happy place, and my happy place is in a studio with that man making music, and that's it. I just sit here and make music and just help other people.
You need someone to just pay you to basically stay in the studio. You need to start a
mastering engineer.
You need to get a Kickstarter.
We'll start a Kickstarter, and then basically we'll get people to just pay you just to stay behind the keyboard all day.
I'm up for that.
I'm just laughing because on my screen every single time you start talking, Stevie, it highlights Sophie. I'm assuming that's your partner.
Oh, does it? Yeah. That's not my latest look, no.
So,
that's my partner, yeah.
Let me drop a question which may be interesting to new producers who are listening. When you're just starting a journey towards being a producer, maybe you've got a laptop, a copy of Ableton, something like that, and you're just like, literally, I'm just going to learn how to produce. For someone aspiring to be a producer, they like the idea of it, what advice would you give them based on all your experience? You've played internationally, you've done, you know, half a dozen albums, scores of singles.
I mean, I think people have individual things that might work better for them, but not so well with others. I mean, for me, I like to maybe have a couple of projects that I'm working on, and then I can really go to town on one until it starts to dry up a bit, and then I'll flip over to the other tune and get fresh inspiration and on that. But that might not work for other people. The other thing is, like I said earlier, finish the tune, man. Just finish it. Like keep chipping away, because
or not, just finish it.
Yeah, the original creative process is the most fun, and a lot of people get stuck in that bit and just start something new and new and new and new, and actually at the end, years later, they haven't finished a track. And I think that's really important. Finish the track.
Finish the track. What about you, Cole?
I'd say people get into making music for various different reasons. Some people want to do it to make money. Some people do it for fame. Some people do it to get laid. I would say that if you want your life as a musician, as an artist, to be satisfying to you on a continuing basis, my experience is that the best way of doing that is to let your focus be just on making the best music you can make, and making the music that calls to you from your heart, that makes you excited. And apart from that, it's a lifetime journey. Enjoy it, but equally important, I think, is if you want this to be your life, then you have to make it your life. Throw yourself into it 150%. and never stop. Because as long as you don't stop, you've always got a chance of becoming successful or reaching the goals that you set for yourself. And this is the advice that I was given when I was 17 years old and first starting to work in recording studios in my hometown. The longer you're a part of the music industry, the entertainment industry, making music, the more chance you have of success. The only surefire way of getting of making sure that you don't get what you want is to stop. It's the only way you can be sure that you'll never get what you want is to stop. So don't stop.
I like that. It's good. That's good advice. I mean, never stopping for me would go hand in hand with being positive. And I think as a young producer or a young DJ, I'd quite often get disillusioned. When you're less experienced, that one gig where it's a bit of a flop would mean more than perhaps a little bit of a glitch in a performance now, you know. After many years of producing, you understand occasionally your laptop's going to crash, occasionally a CD will skip or whatever. You don't hold yourself to ransom as much as perhaps when you're novice, and those things are like a big deal. It's like, someone on MySpace or whatever said something negative about a comment. That can ruin you when you ruin your headspace when you're young. Whereas now, I suppose because you've been at it for so long, that relentless pursuit, never stop attitude. Do you find it hard to keep yourself positive, or is it something that has increased with your sort of time that you've been doing it?
Personally, it's the main worries these days are state of the world rather than what we're going to write next or something. But, I mean, the state of the music industry reflects that, unfortunately. So there's going to be gripes, but generally, it's like you have to count your blessings to say how lucky we are to be in this position, you know. And we've worked hard for it, and we won't stop. You can always find problems, and sometimes you have to face them and shout them out. But a lot of the time, focusing on the positive usually has better results all round for everyone.
Life throws all sorts at you, and I think if you've always got that core of making the music because that's what you want or need to do. If you always keep that as a focus, then that's not something that necessarily that external factors will always can do much to affect, you know, because that's coming from inside you, that you're self-motivated in the fact that, you know, music is your thing. And so if you keep that rather than external factors such as your perceived success or how many gigs you get or how much money you're earning from it, you know, if you try not to focus on those things but let them be whatever they are, then you'll be much more resilient to external.
That makes good sense. That makes good sense. So we're going to link to your social media in the description underneath this when we post. What's a good way for fans to get in touch with you and to follow your music, and where are you most present?
Well, there's the OOOD Facebook page. All the updates and new DJ mixes and the occasional bit of random stuff tends to happen there first. And then there's our personal profiles.
And your website, ood.net?
Yes, ood.net, absolutely. Although it doesn't tend to get updated as much as the Facebook page does.
I mean, I'm assuming if people wanted to have a look at some of your mastering and have a look for the larger, you know, sort of news relating to releases and whatnot. Yeah,
I mean, there's certainly all our history there and discographies on the website. And I do have a page for my mastering as well. As I've also got there's a page on the OOOD website for my mastering, and I've got my Facebook page as well. And Stevie has his Bennun Facebook page as well.
Yeah.
So there's those.
Nice. I mean, I noticed you've got a little bit of stuff out on Bandcamp as well. Steve, you mentioned the state of the music industry. I think Bandcamp's been quite positive for the music industry.
I think it is.
Have you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I have to agree. It's been really positive. People can produce their music, get it out to people. People can buy it really good value. So it's sort of win-win all round. I think.
And most of the money for that goes directly to the artists. So.
We prefer, if possible, to get a label behind us, essentially because what we were talking about earlier is like we're particularly useless at promotion. Labels are very good at that, and they're also, you know, a label. People come to the label; they expect a certain level.
There's a psychology behind it as well. Basically, it's success in music. my attempts to make it as a working musicians go back, as does Steve's, go back many years before we started OOOD in '94. And my experience is that if you've got a team around you, if you've got other people who have visibly already invested time and money in helping promote your music, then that's an incredibly confidence-inspiring thing for the general public. You know, it's not like if you just got an artist saying, "Hey, listen to my music, it's great." It's like, okay, obviously he's going to think his music's great because he made it. But if you've got another organisation or a group of people who have invested time and money in promoting that, and that's an instant advantage for someone promoting music, because it means that it gives other people the permission to buy into it because they can see that someone else has already bought into it.
Yeah.
That's a huge driver of success. And that's, from my personal perspective, that's one of the main reasons to get a label behind you, is to have someone else visibly promoting your music for you that's not you. And this is why some acts whose members promote festivals or work at festivals, they'll use those festivals as a means of increasing their own visibility and of giving the audience the awareness that this is, other people already think this is good because they've booked this act, therefore it's okay for me to think it's good as well. I think that's an incredibly important part of the psychology of record labels and success.
I think that's a fantastic point you make, and that works to, you know, most little niches within the music industry, not just as a DJ or a producer. You know, people who are selling festival tickets, people who are selling merchandise, or through that association, and the more visible you are, the more people see you, the more that trust builds, and the more they're sort of likely to buy into what you're offering, whether it be an ethos or a brand or, you know, that sort of stuff. Crucial point there, mate. Yeah. So you mentioned having a label backing increases that trust and that visibility and whatnot. In the past, have you approached labels, or have you waited for labels to approach you just through association? Maybe you've done a bit of mastering for them and they've gone, oh, you know, fancy putting an EP out. How's that process work?
It's been both, really.
Yeah, both.
With Iboga, we had 3 tracks that Stevie identified as being kind of particularly suitable for their kind of style. And without this, literally the first label we sent those tracks to was Iboga. And within half an hour of me sending that email, with Stevie sat next to me, they'd written back and going, "Yes, all right, we'll have these." So that was you know, that was an example of us contacting a label cold. Well, not quite cold, because I had Bennun and Healy track EP out with them at that point on Iboga Tech. But we do get, I mean, I don't know if Stevie sees many of these, but I certainly get contacted now and again by labels asking to release, asking if we've got anything uncommitted. But generally, they're at the moment they tend to be the more traditional full-on or strictly Psy-Trance labels, and we haven't really written as much of that in recent years as we have done of other stuff. We don't tend to have those kinds of tracks already written and uncommitted for them to take on.
Yeah,
it's been both ways, really. I think I've just had label contact me to see if I had anything. I gave them a couple of things from a collaboration I'm doing with ZZ Bing, a couple of Banyan tracks. No, one Banyan track, and they're going to release them all. So they got in contact with me, but it's more usual for us to go. Actually, I don't know if it's more usual. It's been a bit of both.
50-50.
50-50. One of the things that I'm quite keen on, especially over the last few years, is passing on some of the experience of people I've worked with and my own experience as a DJ, promoter, etc., onto people who are aspiring. Because through my page on Facebook, I do tend to get a lot of questions because of, well, for one reason or another, people asking, I've seen you involved in this project, how would I get started on something like that? And, you know, if you were to pass on a bit of advice for an aspiring producer, would you say, make yourself visible, keep doing it from a position of love, and labels will approach you, just concentrate on finishing music, like you said earlier, and making it good? Or would you say, get practicing early, making those connections and networks, become a finished article, and then send a load of music off to your favourite label? Which approach would you take if you were sort of, I guess, mentoring a new starter through the process?
The first one sounded a bit more like what I've done, but you have to. That would be a self-censor, don't you? Because like if you're writing music, it's like, is this ready? Do I want this to represent this sound? And you can always say no, but if you got to a certain level, you think, do you know what? I think this is going to be a nice release. Then contact a label, and who you think might like to release it, and see what they say. Put yourself out there.
But do it in
I'm sure there's better ways to do things. I'm the wrong person to ask about promoting, really, but I would definitely put yourself out there when you think you've got a product that you are proud of and that you think is good enough for a release. Yeah, give it to as many labels as you can. And if you keep on getting rejected, I would imagine just keep going. Although I'm sure it would get despondent, and maybe it would be time to try something else. But I've heard about classic albums that have got rejected something like 46 times the other day or something. I've forgotten what it was. Like some huge album that has been seminal and changed the world. Not dance music, but. And they got rejected 46 times. But I can't remember who it was. Sorry, I might think of it. I was just thinking.
See if you can find it.
Yeah, imagine going to 46 different places. Like no. My God, I couldn't have got to 46. And then suddenly someone said yes, and it became a worldwide super hit. So I'd say persevere. If you think it's good, then you're legitimate.
Yeah.
Your taste is legitimate, and there's more than likely other people out there that will think the same.
What do you reckon, Cole?
I think it's important to do things in hope rather than expectation. I think it's expectations of success can be a factor in not being able to get it, because you behave in a way that as if you automatically assume you have these coming to you, and that can put people off. And alongside the fact that as someone wrote to me in 1992, which I still have on underneath my studio speaker to this day, success in show business depends on your ability to make and keep friends. Networking in the entertainment and music industry is absolutely vital. And mentioned, should you get out there straight away and start making these networks, then yeah, I'd say that's absolutely vital. Certainly in my work as a mastering engineer, it's all about the relationship with the client. And it's all about treating the client like a real and valued human being. And if you can do that with the other people that you'll meet along your journey in the music industry, you'll put yourself in a much better position to have these people consider you favourably and to want to invest time and energy and other resources into your project.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Just touching on networking for a second, do you feel that, let's go back to pre-social media, I used to feel that a lot of deals musically and a lot of relationships were like formed at the after party. I used to say it was like deals were broken at the after party. Yeah. And that seems to, obviously, whilst that still stands true, people who go the extra mile and are ever present and supporting and whatnot, and within the scene, that still counts. But do you think, what role social media play, do you think, in building those relationships? Do you think that's replaced that face-to-face interaction, or do you think there'll still always be a place for getting out there, showing support at events, etc.?
I think they're complementary. I think they're kind of two complementary skills that if you can get both of them down, then they'll kind of synergize with each other and make it all easier for you in general. I mean, speaking personally, I haven't particularly been present at that many Psy-Trance events over the last few years, but nonetheless, we've recently had some amazing opportunities come our way with certainly with OOOD, with this release on Iboga, and with some stuff that I've done with Bennun and Healy as well, despite my not being a face on the scene quite so much. So I think there is definitely a way in which the Facebook aspect of it, the social media aspect of it, has become more important than it was before. But a lot of the gigs that we were offered this year, that obviously now no longer happening, they came about because of our existing networks, face-to-face networks with the people involved. So it's definitely both. I would say if you're intent on promoting yourself, do it sensitively, but leave no channel unused.
Get out there.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
But be aware of the possibility for kind of getting boring at it. You know, try to avoid that if you can.
That makes sense. Steve, I thought you were just about to climb out the window.
Yeah, managed to not fall out.
Not fall out. We've mentioned Tribe of Frog and some of your other sort of relationships that were important through the building of your career. Is there anyone else you want to just give a bit of a shout out to before we wrap up? Who are you working with at the moment? Who have you got stuff sort of in the pipeline with? Who might the listeners not be familiar with that they definitely need to check out?
You go first.
Okay.
After you.
Well, obviously I've got this long-standing project with Tim Healy of Coburn fame and Electric Teas. And Steve and I we first wrote music with him in 95 with the Unconscious Collective stuff, but I have a project with him now called Bennun and Healy. We've had one EP out recently on Iboga Tech, and we have another one coming out on that same level quite soon. So there's that as well. I've also got a little kind of occasional collaboration with my friend Samuel, and we've got a track out on the latest Psychedelic Jelly compilation. That's more down-tempo stuff. He's an incredibly talented young man. He's absolutely stonking. Really kind of pleased to have seen him come along in the last few years. And I've got a couple of silly tracks out under my own name on the OOOD Bandcamp, just one at the moment, which is an odd time signature prog rock track that I recreated from a performance that I was involved in like 1991. I recreated all the parts and used it up properly. So there's that. That's under the name Complector, which is my kind of solo project.
Nice. And yourself, Steve?
Yeah, got a few things on the go. Been writing with Sean ZZ Bing, who's like quite full on Psy-Trance. We've been meeting halfway with a few tracks. Got releases coming out on a couple of labels. I think it's okay to say, is it? I don't know. Do you know, Cole?
No, I imagine it's fine. Yeah.
Yeah. So got a Bennun track coming out on Caterpillar Records, Japan,
Nice.
and a Agamora, me and Sean, coming out on Caterpillar. Got another 2 Agamora coming out on Phantasm when they're coming back, and another Bennun coming out on Phantasm. Been writing a track just recently with Cy Edwards, which is a sort of psychedelic sort of tech trancey thing, which is just being finished off. There's a couple of labels I might send that to, but nothing. It's not finished yet. Been working on another project with Alex Gaves, who's an old friend. Semi-acoustic album, sort of working as his producer, basically.
Nice.
Those are beautiful tracks. Beautiful tune.
Yeah, so I think that's mostly what's been going on recently, although me and Cole have been particularly concentrating on OOOD in the last little while, mostly.
We'll save that secret for the listeners, and we'll encourage them to follow you on Facebook for further news of that. So,
also, as far as OOOD goes, we've actually got a Psy-Trance track coming out, hopefully in the next 6 months or so, on Grasshopper Records in Japan.
Nice.
Rio's been putting together a compilation for them, and we've done a track for that.
That's handy that he's been.
It's handy that he's been compiling that.
You do this sort of thing for long enough, and those sort of opportunities come along. He is a particularly fine DJ.
Yes.
Yeah. So his track selection and dance floor awareness is right up there with Stephen Rammer's, as far as I'm concerned.
So he's in Japan at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah.
He has been for a while, hasn't he?
Yeah.
Yeah.
A few years now.
Yeah, that's a shame. It'd be nice to get him to come and DJ at a party, but I suspect he's not going to fly over for an hour DJing with us in Manchester.
I suspect there's nothing he'd love
Go inside.
but his responsibilities probably wouldn't allow it.
No, I'm assuming he's very busy. It was quite lucky of us to have caught you lot when there was all 4 of you in the same place at the same time. Because when we first booked you for Strange Days, we got full drum kit, and obviously we booked you a few times since, and that's permutated, who's turned up and who's been available and that sort of thing. But I do feel quite lucky to have had all four of you in the same place at the same time.
We were lucky as well to come and play, mate. So thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we've been very lucky to have been part of a group that's got so many talented people willing to put the time into it that they have, and the musical skills that they have. I mean, playing on stages, some of the stages that we've played on, is good enough. But when you get to do it with your three best mates, that's just multiplied, because I don't know, there's just something about being in a band that you can't get from just being a solo artist, I think.
Yeah, for sure. That
interconnection. Fantastic.
I love it. Anything else that you guys wanted to quickly touch on or discuss or anything like that?
I'd like to say big love to the Psy scene all over the world. Keep at it.
I like that, mate. And yourself, Cole?
I don't think there's anything else. I'm sure there's stuff that we'll think of like in half an hour's time, but right now I think we've covered most of it. Thank you very much.
It's one of those. I'm sure we could probably talk for hours and hours, and maybe at some point, we'll come back and we'll have another in conversation with, because that was I'd written a load of questions and I threw them out the window, pretty much, metaphorically speaking. Just lovely to chat to you both. So thank you for taking the time to have a natter.
Nice one, Chris. Cheers, mate. It was great.
Good luck with everything, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.
Thanks, man. Cheers, and you.
Bye-bye.
Take it easy. Big love. Big love. Big love. Big love. Big love. Big love. Big love.
Strange Radio, bringing you the best in psycho and fantasy.